everybody. I am Andra Annette, and welcome to Narrative Nights. So today I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Jo Ann Fawcett. She lives in Portland, Oregon. She is a mother of a grown daughter, a proud grandmother of three, and she has a 2-year degree in accounting and film production. But Joanne had to dramatically change her life after 7 marriages that included abuse, divorce, death, narcissism, and being a prison wife. So let's get into it with her. She is an author of 2 books. We are going to find out more about them. Please help me welcome Jo Ann Fawcett. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I said when I first saw that, I said 7 marriages. Oh my God.
Yeah, way
So
too many.
yes, yes. And the elements of things that you went through individually are very detrimental to our own personal development and our own resolve, but cumulatively they can be more than just a tad overwhelming. And it's really hard to bounce back from one of those situations. I had a very abusive marriage, and I really had to work on myself, and see why I kept meeting those kind of people, because I had the same circle of people that kept coming into my life. And it was difficult just doing one. So I give you a lot of praise, because 7, I don't know that I could survive that. So tell me a
I, I,
little bit about that.
pardon me?
Tell me a little bit about that journey, what that was like for you.
Well, I think it's a combination of many factors. I grew up in the 50s or 60s and the 60s when you think everything is going to be like on the Leave It to Beaver show. Everybody's going to have this happy little family. Mom gets to stay at home, dad goes to work, the children are great, everybody's great. You marry somebody wonderful, have a bunch of kids, stay married forever. Well, I mean, my dad was an alcoholic. My mom was really good at being a codependent, so I learned being a codependent from her. I also joined the Mormon church when I was 12. And so again, you're learning all these great things about you. You find Mr. Right, you marry forever, have a bunch of kids, everything's gonna be perfect. Well, but nobody ever taught me some of the life skills or the life things that you need to be talking about before you get married. How are you going to run your finances together? Are we going to have kids? What's our spiritual life going to be like together? How will we parent the children? On and on and on. The hard questions, which I now know people need to ask, whether they're going to get married or just be together in a relationship. It's like you have to be prepared to answer the hard questions. And like you touched on, you really have to know yourself and really work on yourself. So it was a combination of thinking, if I just married somebody in the Mormon church, everything is going to work out fine. Well, that isn't always the case, even though I know a lot of people in the church who are happily married. I didn't pick the wrong people. I didn't pick the right people. We didn't court long enough. We didn't ask the right questions. We just dated for a few months, if that, and then got married. And then, it's like they're one face at church and they're another face at home. So, and that can be, it doesn't matter whether you're in a, faith-based marriage or not, the people can be like that. And narcissists are like that. You're one way in front of the crowd and they're another way at home or to you privately. So,
But I think that's true. You mentioned early courtships, but I think that's true. You could be courting somebody a really long time, and they still are very different
yes.
when marriage takes place, right? Because I married my high school sweetheart, and who he was in high school and who he was when we got married was very different, right? So, and you don't know. There was some time between high school and when we actually got married, but you don't know, um, what they've experienced in their life and how they were brought up and what their ideas. So those questions that you talked about are so instrumental, because
Right.
we do. two people can be sitting there talking about marriage, but each person has a different idea of what marriage is and what it represents. So even though we're talking about the same commitments, we're talking or the same institution, um, it's very different what that means. One person might say, I want a wife who stays home, married, barefoot, and pregnant, and someone else might assume that they're both going to work towards the same goals, right? So, those questions are very important, especially finances, because a lot of people fight over finances.
You're right. And it's interesting because husband number seven was he's the one that was in prison, or he's still in prison. He's the prison guy. We were together 25 years, courted 5 years before we actually got married. And I didn't even realize he was a narcissist till I'd been in it for 20 years. Because, as long as you're going along with the flow and following their agenda, everything is smooth. But it was when I started speaking up about certain things, and it was like, he wasn't used to me speaking up, against what anything he had said, but also speaking up for myself. He just wasn't used to that. Because for the longest time, I thought, oh, he's got great ideas. He's telling me all kinds of stories. He's giving me um, historical information that I can now go share with the public and all kinds of cool stuff. And I just didn't think, it's like I knew he was a spoiled brat because he was raised as an only child. He was a military brat and all that good stuff. And so I knew he had a really healthy, strong ego, and humility was not in his vocabulary. But I just kind of went along with that until I realized, was like, how am I going to retire when he's still in there and I don't want to work till I'm 90? I've been paying for his house this whole time for 20 years. It's like, how do I stop paying for his house when I've never seen a dime from him? And so all these little issues started creeping up once I started standing up for myself. And you dare not do that to a narcissist.
How did you wind up in, was he in prison when you met? Did you court and he was in prison?
The whole relationship was he was in prison. He'd already been there like 10 years when I met him through a roommate of mine whose husband was at the same prison when we met. She came home one day and said, "Oh, I met this really nice guy. He's a friend of her husband. He's visiting with his mom. He's really smart. He's nice, blah, 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 blah." And I thought, oh, a smart boyfriend, that would be a nice change. And so we started writing and he seemed very interested. And then after a couple months, we got to meet in person. And then I was just taken in by all his charm and his good stories and all the fun things we talked about and his opening me up to like new topics that I hadn't thought about because my life was pretty, closed in and kind of on a tunnel track. When you're a Mormon, you only think about certain things basically. Your life is pretty well controlled is not the right word. I wouldn't use that, but you're on a certain track and you're not thinking about all the other cool spiritual topics out there. Well, like I wasn't, I was working and raising my daughter. And by the time I met him, she was grown and on her own, but I was raising my daughter and I was just I was working and going to church and doing church stuff and raising my daughter. And so I met him and he introduced me some neat topics like, oh, there's life outside the church. How interesting would that be? So
So through these experiences, what has it done for you as a woman? After living through all of these experiences, what was your takeaway from these situations? Because I think the audience really wants to know. Because we don't want to hear about number 8 unless it's a really good marriage.
it's like I tell people, and I don't mean to sound flippant about this, but I try to use humor in all this because, I'm not going to sit here and cry all day long, but I'm a Leo. So I've let the Leo out of the cage and I now stand up for myself. I speak my truths. I'm very clear on what I believe in. And I believe very strongly in women's rights and equal partnership. So I don't ever care if I ever get married again. I would love to have a long-term or, a lifelong partner that I'm on equal footing with and who respects me and honors me, and I can do the same for him. That we have similar goals and things like that. So all the things you might want in a marriage, but I just don't need the piece of paper anymore. I'm 70. I don't care about that anymore.
You look
Um,
fantastic.
Thank you. So it's more about standing up for who I am and being very transparent and feeling really good about myself and, sharing myself with the community and honoring Mother Nature and being there for my family and showing them that you can make it through really crappy situations and you can survive and you can thrive and that we're not alone in whatever journey we're on and we're here to help each other as a larger community. So
I think that's beautiful. So you wrote two books. What are the name of those books?
the first one is called Midlife Magic because I had basically changed my life when I was in my 40s. And I'd already met number seven, but I'd been through six crappy marriages. He and I were getting along, but then I left the Mormon church after 30 years and I found this wonderful world of magic and fairies and paranormal and the gifts that I have that tie me to Mother Nature and the spirit world. So it's kind of like, part of it, half of it is crappy marriages and the lessons I learned to make me this better person. And then how I changed my life and realized that it's never too late to find the path that really works for you and really start building the life that is best for you. So that's book number one. And the second book is called The Prince Was Wrong, Leaving the Narcissist Behind,
I like
because,
that.
yeah, because his nickname is The Prince and he is a narcissist. So, the cover is a prince in his throne room and his crown is crashing on the floor and shattering into bits. And, he doesn't get a free copy about that book, but he got the book all about himself, because that's what narcissists like. It's all about them. And it doesn't put him in a good light, and I don't really care. And if he ever reads it, oh well, somebody will have had to buy it for him because I'm not giving him a copy. I've changed all the names.
I would definitely send him a copy and I would sign it. I would
Well,
sign it. I would sign it and make sure my maiden name was there. Um,
yeah, that's because in the first book it's by Jo Ann Richards because that was my married name at the time, and now I've taken back my maiden name, so it's right on the front cover, up at the top.
Good girl, good girl. So I think you have a very inspiring message, and I like that you can really start your life over at any time. I was just on a podcast, Interrupted, and it talks about how we all have, you're going along in life, and then boom, something happens, right? And there's an interruption, and it's usually that interruption that leads us to our greater self. So
Right.
at the time, we don't see it as
No.
a godsend. Quite the contrary. We get those poor me's, and oh my God, not again, right? And then we see the greater path. Like you've found your fairies and your spiritual awakening, right?
Right.
In a different life in your 40s. And we all go through these changes, and I think it's so important that women can understand that they can stand alone and start again at any time in their life, you
Correct.
know? Because I think a lot of people go through divorces and they see it as the end of the world, and or even empty nests, like when a child leaves the home, they don't know how to be anything else because they
Right.
were just that mother or just that wife, or and unfortunately life does have to go on, whether we wanted to or not.
Well, and it's interesting because I am trying to practice retirement. I'm not nearly retired at all, but I've cut back on a few clients. I've been warning a few others. It's like, this particular month, X month is going to be your last month because I'm going to start to retire. And so I'm getting there. And I'm going on a big vacation with my sister and her husband. So I'm doing things, but it's like, oh my gosh, if I was totally retired, what am I going to do? Because I knit and I read and I walk, but what do I do? It's like, how am I supposed to fill my day? But yeah, I mean, I will still have clients, but that will be a question for me because I'm not used to having a lot of free time because I've been working so much. But my body needs rest, and I have find that when I do take a few hours out to have a part of a day off, it's like, oh yeah, that was nice. That day didn't go well, but the time off was really nice.
I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I really love what I do, so I spend most of my day at work and or talking about work or work related things. So I totally identify, but you do get to enjoy life too. So um
Yes.
I'm already, well, I'm not 70, I'm 58, and I'm already thinking about retiring. So I've had the same career for 40 years, 40 some years. So I'm ready to go.
Well, and with me, it's like, again, one of the downsides with Mr. Prison was that he had me believing he had all this money so that when he gets out, he would be able to take care of us both just really nicely. It's like, okay. So in my head, I probably was thinking about that, but I was still working and I didn't start setting aside anything for retirement until I was 60. So I don't have a large nest egg saved. Now, my business is doing very well. So I have money that I'm putting in savings and I'm, paying down my debts and things like that. But he did leave me in a lot of debt, but I'm doing better than well, I'm doing fine financially. It's like, yes, I have debts to pay off, but I'm not just scraping by. So it's great. It's not a meager, I'm entering into retirement on a meager income. But I don't want to sound like I'm destitute because I'm not, but I'm not living high on the hog either. I'm trying to be fairly frugal, but I am going on a big vacation at the end of April and I can't wait. But I've been
But
saving for it and I've been paying it off before I even go. So
that's good. And there's a lot of vacations that you can get at a discount, so you
true.
look into them, and they're all over the world.
Yep.
I know people that went to Africa on safari and different places on these group type trips, and she had a blast and she got to see the world, so
Well, I'm going on another cruise with my sister and her husband, and unfortunately, that particular cruise line does not offer a fare for solo travelers. So, because we're going to a place that's on my bucket list, I just bit the bullet and said, okay. And it's going to be a fabulous trip. And then after that, I'll probably need to start looking for the more discounted things. But I just needed to see Scotland and go back to England and stuff. So, yeah,
but you can also promote your books more. So
I know.
in your retirement and get them out there more. And
Yes, and there's another book. I'm going to be working on another book. I've been doing the research for it, and I'll be doing some of the writing while I'm on my trip, so it's all good. So, yeah,
it's good. Do you want to read a little insert from one of your books today?
sure. I'll do a real quick thing from the introduction from The Prince Was Wrong. Has your partner ever told you you should try to be prettier? You started your business in my house, putting my needs on a back burner. I didn't support your project because it wasn't good timing for me. You sold big household items to pay for your project, putting all my efforts aside. You seem to be under the misconception that because I've tried to be nice about the situation, you can have everything your way. Men just don't tell their wives or partners why they love them. Guys just don't do that. If I'm with you, that should be enough. And those are the things I heard from my narcissist. And my heart goes out to you if you've heard things like these. And if you have, like I did, you might be the victim of a narcissistic abuse. So that's one passage.
I like that. Do you want to read the a little insert from the other book where you're turning your life around? I think that would be
Sure.
So people can see the difference, have something to gauge.
The first book, it says this book is about my personal transformation from a boring middle child woman with numerous failed marriages to someone who's found a new path. Although I still have struggles, I now have new sources of strength supporting me. I've learned that I've always been a strong person. I have learned the importance of claiming my power and standing up for who I am. I'm a warrior. I'm determined. I believe in keeping a gratitude practice and in the power of manifesting what is for my highest good. I have discovered intuitive abilities that I hadn't known I had possessed, and I've gone from being a religious person to a spiritual person. I'm delighting in this newfound world of wonder, and I want to carry on with it. And so I figure I need at least another 40 years so I can do all the things I want to do. So I never aspired to be a writer, and I have the bug now. And I'll just say that the third book is going to be kind of like completing a trilogy here, but it's more about coming full circle and going from the little mousy woman to writing about female empowerment and healing some generational trauma that I've discovered's been part of my family.
I talk about generational trauma lot.
Ah,
I think and I'm trying to break some stigmas around that because a lot of people don't realize that we're not even living our lives, we're living somebody else's story. And a lot of those traumas, I just did a book on addiction. I'm trying to break stigmas everywhere I go. Um, a lot of, people always say what happened, they don't say, what happened to them. They say shame on them, right? But
ah,
usually those addictions are tied to some trauma because all addiction really is a coping mechanism,
right.
whether it be a bad coping mechanism or not. People don't understand that most of those people have some kind of trauma. They have some kind of unmet need in one of the stages of development in their growing years, right? Even in the best situations, in the best families, it still happens. So I really believe that so many people are holding on to trauma and it's leading to that sickness that people are developing, because all the disease that we harbor in the body comes from what we feel in our minds, those stories
Exactly.
that, so, I'm trying to help people see that in my journey,
Oh, cool.
that we're a complete system, that the spiritual, the physical, the mental, the emotional, they all work together. We're one
They
human.
do.
You're not spiritual and part physical, you because I was emotionally broke, Jo Ann. I
Yeah.
was spiritually unfit. At different parts of my life, I was missing a major pillar and I wasn't whole. So
Oh,
I do understand the importance of all of them in that connection to really find that wellness. My life is totally different today. And I sometimes I just want to shout it from the rooftops. You don't understand what you're missing. This is great, you know. But people will get it when they'll get it. But a lot of it is trauma, and I don't think our families meant to hurt us. I think it came from their generational stories and they were just passing down what they learned. So I don't think it was intentional. But at some point, we have to stop passing it on to the next generation and start breaking down those barriers now because the future generation is not looking good. If, I did a show recently with someone, her book was 5 a.m., The Silence After Goodbye. So there, in her country and in her culture, depression was stigmatized. It was considered a sign of weakness. So a child took his life. So how many more children do we have to lose to addiction and suicide before we start looking at what's going on with them and what
right.
happened to them, instead of pointing fingers and we're worrying about what people are going to think, right?
Well, and in my case, I mean, just one thing, it's like as I did some research, I realized that there had been an assault or violation or molesting by some family member or close family friend throughout, throughout my female, one particular line, because that's all I've researched so far. It's like, everybody, and that's just what happened, and nobody talked about it, and the men never got in trouble, and it's happened to me, and I don't think it's happened to my daughter or her daughters, but it's like it has to stop, and we have to be able to talk about it. And I know that my mom and my grandmas, by me doing the work that I'm doing, they're healing from at least that one thing. And I know that through the work that I'm doing and by writing my stories, because I put my daughter through hell basically by subjecting her to several stepfathers, and some of them were physically abusive. And it was no part picnic for her. And it's like now that, especially now that I live here near her, we've had the chance to heal our wounds and become stronger. And hopefully her daughters can see that, it's good. It's possible for mothers and daughters to get along and really love being with each other and be best friends. And they've seen grandma do some powerful things. And I don't know if they've actually read my books, but they've heard me talk about it enough. So hopefully that's planting some seeds for them going forward. And I know they've asked me about the books, and I've certainly been pretty honest about certain aspects about what I was writing about. So, they know what grandma's about, and they see my posts, and sometimes they pay attention to them or like them or whatever. So at least my grandchildren know what I'm doing.
That's a good thing. And anytime we can take something negative and turn it into something positive, we
Right,
won. So we're winners. A lot of people look at the failures and that little chapter of our life instead of the full book. But those
right.
failures all lead us to that success. So I'm a big advocate for failures. I actually have in my groups fail Fridays because I think that it's just as important to celebrate your failures as it is your
Well, they're
successes.
opportunities and they're lessons.
Yeah,
And oh, where is it? Oh, maybe it's in this one. I was just going to say, I read, do you know who Glennon Doyle is, the author?
yeah.
Okay. Um, when I moved up here and during COVID, I read her book Untamed. And in there she says, the thing that breaks your heart is the very thing you were born to help heal. Every world changer's work begins with the broken heart. So while I may have made a lot of mistakes and had failures and had to pick myself up and had to learn a lot of lessons, I'm finding it's like, okay, and this is the message I'm getting out there. It's like, women, we're here, we can help each other get better or feel comforted or know that we're not alone and know that, you know, we don't need to be ashamed of ourselves or whatever. It's like we can feel our powerful self that we are, and we can stand up for ourselves, even if you can't leave the situation. But there's still ways to strengthen yourself and get through it. So, you know, that's what I went through, and that's what I'm here to help heal in any small way that I can.
I love what you're doing. I love what you're
Thank you.
doing. So where can they buy your books?
They're on Amazon and all the usual, online formats. I also have a website, joannfawcett.com, so they can get them through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are going to send me those links because they will go under this video. They can't go on the TV channel because there's a TV guy there. Um but but they can absolutely go to the podcast station. So
Okay. And yeah, and I've got an email, so I'm happy to just chat with people if they need a little peer support.
okay.
Yeah,
So you give me all that. That will be below this, okay?
great.
And I'll also put the links to her books if you guys are interested in the book. I think these are both very powerful books, and I think they can really help. Even if you're not in these situations, often we will encounter someone that
Right.
is, and it's important to know the signs so we can help. Women have to be able to pick each other up. We're as strong as we we are willing to become, right? So, but we don't do this alone, ladies. We need each other. We need to support each other and unite and step into our power. So if
And
you could leave the audience with one final thing that you think that would really help them on this journey, what would that be, Jo Ann?
just know that you're not alone. There's over 150 million people in the United States alone that are victims of narcissistic abuse. So just know that you're not alone, and there's a whole community out here who can help you heal, and just know that you're not alone and that you can see that there is hope. And if you go to my website, and sign up for my email list, you'll get a nice little poster about the red flags of narcissism, so that'll help you see, well, you know, am I part of this, or is this what I'm going through? Because I didn't know until I
Yeah.
had to talk to my therapist. But the message is you're not alone and we're here to help you.
Okay. I love it. We're going to leave it at that. Thank you so much,
Thank
audience, for
you.
tuning in to this week's session of Narrative Nights, and have a great evening.
Great. Thank you.